Hello and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansevieri with Amy Cornell. And I'm really excited about, I listen back to some of the episodes and I say that a lot, that I'm really excited about the show. I'm really excited about the show. I'm really excited about all the shows because we love doing this podcast. In fact, Amy and I know I can speak for her in this instance. We both really look forward to recording these shows, and we look forward to sharing these topics with you, because I think that there is something, as much as we love the blog on the website, there's something very different about having us in your car or in your ear or on your phone and speakerphone sitting on your desk while you're working away. It's a little bit more, I think it's a little bit more personal in a way, that we can share our thoughts, and as Amy always says, our strong feelings. The show title today is Let's Talk About Recouping Your Book Investment. I want to be really clear at the onset from this show. We are not talking about secrets to recouping your book investment, but rather the things that are going to actually prevent you from recouping your book investment. I mean, Amy, is that a good way to phrase it?
Yeah, it's definitely a trap. I think that a lot of mindset,
It's a trap.
Yeah, it's a trap.
It's a trap.
But it's like a mindset trap that a lot of authors get into when they get so focused on what they've put into a book to date, which we fully respect. It is not an inexpensive venture for the most part for a lot of people. So we understand where that's coming from. But as you said, Penny, it can definitely hinder you more than it can help you by making that your focus.
Yeah, it really can. And the thing about it is too, though, because I talked to an author last week and he said, he goes, I'm really being hit up by all these companies who are promising bestseller status and bestseller this and bestseller that. And it's great to have the bestseller flag on your book. And so with the Amazon Author Formula, carried the Amazon bestseller flag for months. But we talked about that in one of the shows, and we don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on that. So definitely look back through some of our shows where we talk about how that happened. But the problem with a lot of the language that's out there around marketing is that it's deceptive. And I'm not necessarily saying that everybody else is lying except us. That's not what this is about. But it's deceptive because a lot of times authors don't understand that you can carry the bestseller flag on Amazon and only need 5 books to get that flag. So what we hope to do in this show is not necessarily debunk the myth of marketing ROI, although I personally hate the term ROI. Like, what's our ROI? I'm like, I freaking do not know. After 24 years in business, there's no hard and fast way to measure return on investment per strategy that you do. And that's the thing that we're also going to talk about today. And Amy, you have this great quote that I want to lead the show off with.
Yeah, it's funny. I will say I got it from CrimeCon. I was at CrimeCon recently. It was fabulous.
I love it.
I know. And I'm going to give credit where credit is due. It was actually said by Matt Murphy, he's a former prosecutor in California. And he actually has a book coming out, and he made a really clever joke and accurate one about how he wrote a book and he thinks it's actually lost somewhere in Panama Canal because it's taking forever to ship here. And I thought, oh my gosh, we know how that goes. So many of our clients go through that. His version was not about book marketing, of course, but it was so perfect. And so the quote is, waiting until after your book is out to figure out how you're going to market it is like trying to put on a wet bathing suit. And it's so perfect. The way he said it had to do with law, but this also works for marketing. Anybody that's tried to put on a wet bathing suit knows how complicated and frustrating that is. And we see it every day with authors that come to us when their books are already out and they've just kind of hit a wall, right, Penny, for lack of a better word, in terms of what to do next.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, I mean, to be fair, part of the reason why we do this show is because there is a lot of confusing information out there.
Yep.
It's a journey really without a roadmap in many cases, right? So, you have this great idea for a book and you put it out there, and um the perception is that when you throw it up on Amazon, it's the field of dreams and people will just beat a path to your door. And then months down the road, you're trying to shimmy into that wet bathing suit and you realize that that's actually not the case. But when it comes to recouping a book investment, a lot of times authors will start with pricing a book such that they've done the math in their head and they say, well, if I price my book at whatever outlandish number that is, let's call it $50, right? And I've seen that. So this isn't just, I'm not just pulling this out of the air. Then I only have to sell, let's say, 100 books or whatever that number is to recoup the investment that I made thus far in the book production. So this isn't even really about paying for the marketing. This is, I'm going to price my book at such a number. And I cannot tell you, if I had a dime for every time, which ironically, of course, I'm using a money analogy. If I had a dime for every time that I've heard an author say, I'm going to price my book such that I can earn back the investment that I made in the editing and the cover, blah, blah, et cetera, or whatever, I would be doing this podcast from my villa in the south of France right now. I mean,
Right, Penny. It makes about as much sense as me thinking I should start charging my 11-year-old for rent.
right, exactly.
I've invested so much in them so far. I feel like they need to start contributing this.
Right. Slackers, they need to be paid. So when you have to price your book competitively. It's not that you want to price your book competitively. You absolutely have to price your book competitively. And I am not going to sit here and tell you, I want you to make your book 99 cents or free, because that ship has sailed. And we've talked about this on prior podcasts. You have to have a book that is priced to the market, not necessarily to your pocketbook.
Mm-hmm.
So, and do you want to take the next one, Amy? Because I could go on for days on the recouping, and I should just hit my own edit button, because I don't think that's what the show is supposed to be about.
No, but it's very fair. We do hear, as you said, everything, it sounds terrible. We almost have no original ideas. Everything that we address on this show is based on real life issues, challenges, problems, questions that we get from authors repeatedly, not just one-offs. So we 100% talk about what's a problem for most of you out there. So the next one, and all of these are going to be really closely tied together. And I already kind of hinted at this with the quote about the wet bathing suit. But truly, waiting to invest in marketing to see how the book does, that's another big problem. We hear that a lot. And again, this often ties into the fact that authors did not fully prepare for what it costs to market a book. Whether you're hiring a firm like us or even just doing it on your own, it's not free. Not everything can be free when it comes to marketing and promotion. So waiting until the book is out, looking into your marketing, then realizing, oh my God, I'm out of money. I'm just going to wait to see how the book does first, because it kind of buys you a little time mentally. Like, I can kind of see where this comes in. It's like, okay, let's see how the book does. Give me a little bit of time and maybe I'll invest in my book if it starts doing well. And that's a very backwards way to look at it. In today's market, what was the stat recently, Penny? Is it like 11,000 books now a day?
Well, there's a book published every 8 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are insane. So it really, you just can't expect a book to perform on its own without your support. That's just not how it works anymore.
Yeah.
So don't hold off on your marketing to see how the book does. Plan for that. Or if you're in a position to where my book is out, I was going to hold off to see how the book does. Refigure, rethink, find out what you can do that works for your budget, but do something.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I'm going to take that. So before we did this, when we were in the green room, as we were starting to unpack this show, we talked about that we need to make a list of things that we're going to talk about, because otherwise Amy and I could just go on forever about this topic, about the, recouping the book investment, because it's such a broad, consistent, persistent problem in the industry. And I think that where another issue crops up is authors who focus on ROI, right? So I personally loathe the term ROI because, as I mentioned early on, there's no, it's, marketing, and this is not just, indicative of book marketing. There is no one-to-one correlation between I'm going to do this and I'm going to make this. It just doesn't happen that way. So I think when we talk about why it irritates me when authors focus on ROI, and again, I say irritate, I understand it. I'm running ads for my Amazon Author Formula book. I'm not going to spend an infinite amount of money on this book just because, that's what I feel like I need to do. It's not what I feel like I need to do at all. So I'm very cautious of that myself. But I think when you focus on ROI, you're really focusing on the wrong things, which kind of is, so I really want to do a show at some point about marketing motivation, right? And I love talks of motivation, like as you've heard before on prior shows, like I'm not just a true crime junkie, but I'm also a self-help junkie. When authors focus on the wrong things, it prevents them from actually succeeding. So if you find yourself focusing on sales, like, oh my gosh, I'm checking my sales. In fact, I talked to an author yesterday, and we've worked with her now for, I want to say 5 or 6 years. We worked with her for a long time. She said, we had a conversation about this yesterday, and she said, she says, I'm on a lot of boards and I'm in a lot of author groups on Facebook, and everybody is just meanders about sales, sales, sales. And she said, I'm focusing on achievements. I'm focusing on, I want to achieve this, like I want to get 10 more reviews, or I want a bestseller flag, even though I realize that in some cases I only need 5 books to get there. Focus on achievements instead of focusing on sales. Those are the things that are going to help to drive you forward, because in the end, when somebody asks me how do you sell books, it's always it's always cumulative, right? So it's you've done your Amazon optimization, you're pitching your book to influencers and bloggers, you're doing you're doing Amazon ads, you're doing a Goodreads giveaway, you're doing a lot of different things, or maybe you're doing speaking events, whatever. All of those achievements start to build the foundation that you sell books. But if you're sitting there and you're clicking your sales numbers and you're refreshing your sales numbers like a stock market junkie, that's actually not going to get you anywhere, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, 100%. And I think, and we're kind of, sorry, everybody, we're kind of doing these out of order because again, we're like, we have all the thoughts on things. So the fact that we have specific talking points is already like above and beyond. But another thing, this comes in the planning stages, production choices. We see this a lot with clients too. Sometimes they catch it before it's too late. Other times it comes up after the fact based on the market response. But the choices you make about how you produce your book. So the type of cover, the type of paper, the amount of illustrations and drawings, depending on what's in there, graphics, things like that, all of those add up in terms of how much your book costs. And this kind of goes back to, Penny's point about pricing your book, that all those elements add up to what it costs you to actually get that book to market, what you have to charge for it. And then at that point, it's really in the hands of your potential buyers. And Penny and I see it pretty consistently. Unless you are a really big name and already have a following, very few people are going to take a chance and spend above and beyond what's typical for the topic, for your genre, on somebody they don't know. No matter how great your book looks, no matter how great your description is, it really just is a really difficult hurdle to get over.
Yeah.
Not that it's impossible, but it will take you a lot longer. Penny talks about the runway, uses the runway reference. If your book has to be more expensive and there's no way around it, your runway is going to be a lot longer before you start seeing the market response, before you start seeing sales, before you start seeing reviews, things like that. It will extend that for you.
Yeah. And, because we had an author, I think this was uh, a couple of years ago now. And this is when the production choices, I mean, we've really hammered this home with some authors, and they priced the book was gorgeous. I mean, it was a beautiful, beautiful book. The paper was so heavy, the book was so heavy that the once the book was up on Amazon, it had to be priced at $100
Mm.
because the production of the book took so much and it cost so much to produce this book. And I mean, the truth is the majority of us are not going to face those kinds of production choices. This was a full color interior, hardback, etc. So most of us are not going to face that, but production choices still matter, because if you have a lot of interior images, or you want to do a color interior, when a color interior, like I have images inside of my book, I did not do a color interior for that book for the express reason that it would price my book out of the market, right? So that's something, that's something to consider. I think that a lot of times authors are unprepared for the investment that it takes. And I'm not just talking about, you know, um, if you're going to hire a company, or if you're going to if you're going to do it yourself, it's not just the initial investment, it's the long-term sweat equity and monetary investment that it takes to have a book succeed. And I hope at this point in the podcast, y'all aren't thinking, oh my gosh, this just sounds hard. Um, because it's very much like starting a business, right? I mean, the first 2 years that I had my business, I mean, I was clinging to not a lot, because, well, I mean, because, let's face it. I mean, it was in a startup.
Yeah.
I honestly, just by full disclosure, I mean, I still had a part-time job, just because I was, it takes time for things to start, to turn around. And I think as an author, you have to ask yourself, how long are you willing to stick with it? Not, and again, this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to throw $10,000 a month at your book at all. In fact, we generally don't, throwing money at the problem. Throwing money at the problem doesn't really solve it. But I think you have to really ask yourself, are you really in this for the long haul? Right? Because if I hadn't been in it for the long haul, Amy and I unfortunately would not be here doing this podcast. I'd be doing something and probably be super bored right now.
Right.
Instead of having fun, every day is fun. It's an adventure.
Right. There you go.
Yeah.
I think another element or another piece of this that we see sometimes too is whether or not you're really dialed into the market for your book.
Yes.
How big that market is, who that market really is. We did a show recently on buyer versus reader. That ties into this really well. So I won't go too far down that rabbit hole. Definitely check it out. But it can make a huge difference as well in recouping your investment for your book. If you're banking on book sales for those and things like that, making sure you're focused on the right people, marketing to the right people, being very clear about who your reader is, being realistic about who they aren't. I think one of the big pitfalls that we hear authors say, Penny, when they come to us, when we ask them questions about their book, when they say, my book's for everybody, everybody would benefit from my book. And it's like, that is not focused enough. You are not going to be doing the right things to actually sell books in that case if you just think everybody's going to buy your book, because that's another trap that's easy to get into, because then you feel like, well, as long as it's there, people will figure it out. It's like, that's not how this works. So you need to know exactly who you're trying to reach, how you need to reach them, where you need to reach them. Be very smart about how you're presenting your book to your potential buyers and readers. Again, we've done lots of episodes on pitching and markets and positioning yourself correctly. So we won't go into all of that here, but it really does make a huge difference in whether or not you're actually going to be able to recoup some of your investment, because you have to be getting it in front of the right people. Otherwise, you can spin your wheels for a long time and continue to be in the red on your marketing and promotion if it's not getting in front of the people it needs to get in front of.
Right. And then by the same token, um, we're also talking about, have you written a book for which there is a market, right? Because we see that a lot too, where we get authors that come to us and they there's no market for that particular book. And I can't think of an example right now, just off the top of my head, but we've seen that as well, right, Amy?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we had one recently, Penny, that is near kind of on the verge of falling into that, just based on how general it is, you know? Yep, we've talked about that too, is that when a topic is too broad, or, sadly in this day and age, if everything in your book is something that people are already getting daily via social media and other online outlets that are right at their fingertips, you're going to have a harder time selling that book. Your book has to be a unique version of information that's already out there. So you have to make sure that you stand out in that regard. And I think we did a show on that a really long time ago, actually, specifically for nonfiction, about how to make your nonfiction book stand out in an age where people try to Google everything,
Yeah.
because it's definitely a real challenge. There are ways around it. There are ways to combat that, but it takes strategy. It's not just putting the book up there.
Right, exactly. And I think that one of the things that I really love so much when Amy and I were talking about new clients who come in the door is, um, a lot of times Amy will, and don't just email her to get this because she'll be totally on to you, but a lot of times Amy will give authors some quick feedback on the things that maybe they can do to be better, to create a more robust cover or a book description or something. And I think that a lot of times authors are afraid to ask the really hard questions because we don't want to know. And again, I get it, because I've sat there and fallen in love with covers that I think are just great. And then, I'll run them by Amy and she'll be like, no, this doesn't work for XYZ. And she and I always joke that she's kind of killing my buzz, but she's genuinely always right, which also kind of pisses me off sometimes, where I'm like, oh my God, I love that cover. But you really have to be able to ask yourself the really hard questions. Is the cover good enough? Is the book description strong enough? You have to really kind of check your ego at the door. That is one of the biggest issues that I find that authors, when you fall in love with your book, and we all love the things that we create, and I get it. But when you fall in love with your book, you lose a lot of objectivity, right? And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes you can get that from the people you hire or spend some time consulting with. But asking the really hard questions, like, is there a market for the book? Like, did I actually write a book for which there is actually a readership? Or can they just Google this, all this information, and what am I doing with my time? Is my cover good enough? Those are the things that are going to really make a difference, right?
Right. I think that's so very true, Penny. And it's true. If I see something, it's kind of like, if you see something, say something.
Right.
So I typically, if I do see something, especially something that's, my mother always taught me growing up, that you should let somebody know if something if they can fix it, if they have something in their teeth, if there's something on their pants. If they can't fix it, let them live in that alternative reality.
Right.
But I kind of take that to when clients approach us. And if I see something very simple, like they haven't claimed their author central yet, I will always say something and say, hey, whether you work with us or not, do this. Here's the link. You know what I mean? Send me more info, whatever. But it's true. Not having a really exceptional, superior product is a problem. And to circle back to our original wet bathing suit reference, it works again. So not putting out a really great product in the first place, on top of not being prepared for the marketing, what it takes, what it requires, when it needs to happen, is like trying to put on a wet bathing suit that's covered in sand. And
Right.
now everybody's cringing. They're all like, oh. it's really true. You said, I love when you said shimmy into that soup, Penny, because that even adds more to the visual. And we all have that like now sensory feeling too, sand getting dragged up our legs.
I know it. I know it.
But truly, marketing is already challenging. That's why we do this show. We try to cut through some of that. But if you're not already putting out a really great product to market, then that is that wet bathing suit covered in sand.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. And we should ping Matt Murphy and tell him to listen to the show, because you borrowed his line. And it definitely fits in this case, because I think that the strategy of spending so much time focusing on recouping your book marketing investment is definitely the wrong mindset, and will just really lead you down a path that we've seen a lot of authors do, which is basically just give up because nothing good is really happening with their book. I want to thank you all so much for listening to the show. Share the show with somebody who you feel could really benefit from it. And we love reviews wherever we just had just had somebody write us. I don't think that they posted it on iTunes, but they sent us this long email with this review, and I was just floored. Amy and I were both just floored. It just made her day. So if you can't post on iTunes, definitely let us know your thoughts and show ideas, because we love show ideas. And thank you again so much for listening. This is Penny Sansevieri and Amy Cornell, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.